All right, and with that, the union budget for the financial year 2025-26 has been tabled in the Parliament by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. This was the 8th budget that was presented by the current Finance Minister. Now, Saleh, we've been discussing how this appears to be a very middle-class oriented budget that's been presented this time around.
That is indeed true, Haim. This is something that very few people would have expected, because generally when budgets are presented, the finance minister has many different aspects that she looks at. The middle class, I'm pretty sure, in terms of what they've heard in the course of the last 75 minutes, would be thrilled. But we, of course, need to look at the details of what is in fact being said. There's a lot of detail that will still emerge from the annexures, because remember, this is the major budget speech. The devil, of course, lies in the annexures that will be looked at by the chartered accountants, and they'll come out and say that this is what would be the tax relief. But it is an important step here, because one of the things which Nirmala Sitharaman stressed is that at this time the government is forfeiting a substantial chunk of money that it gets out of taxes, both through direct taxes and indirect taxes. And she says that this is money that will be available for the people, which will be in their pockets, which will raise consumption, which will also raise savings. Because remember, one of the most worrying things that had happened, especially in the reports that had been put out by the RBI, is that private consumption had gone down.
Absolutely.
So now it remains to be seen as to how the market, of course, reacts to all of this, and how the public, of course, looks at this. Because remember, there was a lot of pressure on the government that not enough had been done for the middle class, and this, I'm pretty sure, goes on to address some of those concerns.
Absolutely. In fact, Saleh, just before the budget was presented, we were also joined by Adil Shetty, and we were discussing about how perhaps this current budget should focus on presenting a fairer tax design. What that essentially means is, of course, sharing the tax burden. We had some stats as well that less than 7% of the Indians file tax currently, and with 60% reporting zero taxable income.
Indeed.
So whether or not this current budget has addressed that issue, that's of course something we'll discuss with the analysts and experts as well. And that's something that remains to be seen.
That is something that, when the finance minister announces these aspects, spreading out the tax net, bringing more and more people, in the ambit of tax. At this moment, yes, that is one of the concerns. But there are a whole host of different announcements that are being made, because remember, this was a budget which Nirmala Sitharaman said will be focused on ensuring that growth picks up. Because one concern had been that the growth perhaps was slowing down, consumption was going down, jobs had to be created. So a number of different announcements have been made. The middle class, of course, is looking at the changes in the tax slabs. The information has just been put out where the slabs and rates being changed across the board. It's going to be very interesting to see as to how each of these issues, of course, plays out. But remember, this is a budget that in many ways has ticked a lot of the boxes. We'll, of course, be speaking with the experts, the chartered accountants, and they'll tell us more as to how much the middle class, of course, ends up saving. But one of the issues, Haim, that stood out was, again, going back to that Make in India scheme that the Narendra Modi government has been talking about, to try and provide incentives for companies to come and construct in India, to also ensure that people can actually open businesses. Those policies are to be streamlined. And one of the issues that Nirmala Sitharaman kept stressing over and over again, and that was about easing the process in which taxes are collected.
Right. Now, they've highlighted the government's efforts to implement tax reforms that are aimed at improving taxpayer convenience. Now, as I mentioned earlier, new income tax bill will be announced next week. We were discussing this as well, Saleh, that no income tax payable up to 12 lakhs under the new regime, which you said there's, of course, the devil's in the details. There's a lot of grey here, and how that essentially...
we need to wait for that time, because oftentimes, this is something that the chartered accountants would be able to shed more light on. Oftentimes, what is given by one hand can be so easily taken away by the other. We still need to wait and watch out for the annexure that, of course, has been put out. There are new tax slabs that have come out where the income tax will begin from the income of 8 to 12 lakhs. That is at 10%. 12 to 16 lakhs will be taxed at 15%. 16 to 20 lakhs at 20%. 20 to 25 lakhs at 25%, and above 25 lakh of personal income will be taxed at about 30%. This is the big change that has happened, and we now, of course, need to wait and watch. But look at how the markets are reacting. The Sensex at this moment as we speak seems to be giving a pretty handsome thumbs up because the Sensex is up by 658 points. So the markets have reacted fairly comfortably and they've given a thumbs up to the finance minister's budget.
Right, absolutely. Now, I believe we were discussing this earlier as well, and how when we talk about the issues that the government was facing going into the budget presentation, that was urban consumption which was weakening, which has of course delayed the revival of private investments, taxpayers, especially the middle class, they needed relief, which appears to have come in some form at least. We will of course get into the details of that. Some of the broader outlines of this budget, if I may, were driving economic growth, ensuring inclusive development, boosting private sector investment, strengthening household consumption, enhancing the spending power of India's expanding middle class. All right, for more on this, we are now being joined by Mr. Jayant Krishna, Senior Fellow, Center for Strategic and International Studies, live from New Delhi. Also joining us is Adil Shetty, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of bankbazaar.com. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast.
Pleasure.
Mr. Krishna, let me in fact start off with you in this case. You know, a number of different announcements have been made. Very seldom do we see the middle class being addressed directly in the manner in which the finance minister, one believes, has addressed them. Do you think many of the people who had said that, listen, the budget is announced, but the middle class seldom gets what it wants, have those concerns been addressed by the finance minister this time round?
Yes, to some extent, because middle class was feeling a lot of distress. If you look at, their the income in real terms in the post-COVID era has not really gone up substantially, whereas the tax regime income tax regime had remained almost unchanged. So now exempting people earning up to 12 lakhs or perhaps 12.75 lakh, if you add standard deduction, will not have to pay any tax. I think that's a big relief for them. But again, for people above 24 lakh of income, which again in today's India, a lot of people have income more than that. There's no change. The rate remains 30%. So yes, something has been done, but to my mind, I think even a greater exemption, greater limit, rationalization should have been done. And the effort should have been to increase the tax net. The very, very small percentage of Indian population that pays taxes. The rich farmers, who have lifestyles of lords, they don't pay a penny. And which also incentivizes people to park their income fakely under agriculture. So I think these are areas could have been done, but at least some beginning has been done for people who have very, very moderate incomes. So I welcome that. But obviously more could have been done, but surely, yeah.
Of course, we were also talking about how the aim was to increase taxpayer convenience. Do you think this budget has addressed that? As you mentioned, this appears to be a promising beginning. There could have been better exemptions, but do you think that has been achieved?
So that would be seen in fine print, because I didn't find in the budget speech much of that mention at all. But overall, if you look at some of the big areas, I somehow thought after the economic survey, which was tabled in the parliament yesterday, that there'll be big transformative ideas, for changing the course of our economy. That somehow did not happen to the extent at least I had anticipated. But still, there's some welcome areas like, the urban sector reforms. There's the Urban Challenge Fund with 1 lakh crore, which has been put. If cities have to emerge as the engines of double-digit growth, I think that's very, very heartening. That's good. 20,000 crore has been pumped in for research and development in science and technology in private sector. That is good. And of course, the foreign direct investment limit for insurance sector having gone up from 74% to 100%. That's good. I also welcome in the skill development space, 5 national centers of excellence which have been announced. It's hugely, and the clarity with which the government has come about that they'll be opened with overseas collaboration. That's very important, because if you have skilling within the country from the technologies available within the country, you'll go this far and not beyond. So I think that's something very, very interesting. And I also welcome, for the agriculture sector, almost 1.7 crore farmers in 100 districts, which are known for poor agro productivity, they will get benefited. So those are good stories. A little help for MSMEs also in terms of their loans, getting enhanced, the maximum loan that they can get, startup loans getting enhanced from 10 crore to 20 crore. I think these are in general positive things. But as I said earlier, budget did not meet my expectations of being as transformative as the 91 budget of Dr. Manmohan Singh.
Interesting. Mr. Adil Shetty, if I can bring you in here, it is seldom that we see the middle class celebrate after a budget is announced. A number of changes have been made to the tax slabs. In your assessment, do you think the finance minister has done enough to address the distress which the middle class was particularly feeling? Mr. Adil Shetty, if you can hear me, the question was addressed to you where, can you hear me, sir? I think there's an issue with the line there. We will try and reconnect with Mr. Adil Shetty there. But this, of course, is going to be a big highlight in terms of how this budget will be received. But you can't satisfy everyone. You can't make everyone happy with the announcements that have been made. Jayant Krishna, there we heard, he said that it did not match up to his expectations. It was not the kind of budget that we had heard by Manmohan Singh in 1991.
Right.
But still, there are many important announcements that have been made. We, of course, need to wait and watch out for as to how this will play out. But at this moment, if you're looking at how the markets have reacted, the markets are up. The Nifty is up by nearly 236 points. The Sensex is also up as well.
Right, and I believe Mr. Jayant Krishna is still on the line with us. Thank you so much for staying on with us, Mr. Jayant Krishna. I also wanted to discuss, the budget includes measures to enhance efficiency of MSMEs and startups, including funds. How will these initiatives influence India's innovation ecosystem and entrepreneurial landscape? Well, let me ask that question again. Mr. Krishna, I hope you can hear me right now. I was asking you about MSMEs and how the budget includes measures to enhance efficiency of MSMEs and startups. How do you think these will address how will these innovation systems help the ecosystem and entrepreneurial landscape? That's what I was asking you.
I think entrepreneurial landscape, has been there seem to be adequate measures for MSME loan limit has been increased. The credit guarantee scheme has been rationalized. For startups, the loan provisions have been jacked up from 10 crore to 20 crore. I think, and more importantly, the national manufacturing mission, which has been set up, which will cut across small, micro, MSMEs, large industries. I think that's very welcome because a lot of policy initiatives, which get lost in multiple ministries in Government of India. I think now there'll be a focus on the kind of policy initiative for the industry, as well as on governance matters, on monitoring, on providing support to the industry. I think that it depends how it takes shape. But conceptually, I find that as welcome, not only for MSMEs and startups, but for large industries also.
Interesting. Now, Mr. Krishna, one of the aspects that the finance minister stressed upon a lot was on Vivad Se Vishwas scheme. A lot of people had critiqued the government, saying that the manner in which taxes are now being collected, this is what Mohandas Pai had said, that there is almost an atmosphere of tax terrorism. Do you think the finance minister in her budget speech has addressed that?
So which is the scheme you talked about? I missed that name.
Vivad Se Vishwas scheme.
Yeah, so I think, as an announcement, I welcome that. But, I need to read in fine prints as to what exactly those measures are, because, in India, you have that problem. People who are, honest taxpayers, they get, survival for them is very, very difficult. Every penny gets taxed at source itself. Everything is accounted for. And a lot of people in informal economy, unorganized sector, they get away from taxes. So how the finance minister intends to help those people beyond this one-liner or the name of the scheme, I think it remains to be seen. But as an intent, I welcome that because I think, people who are paying their taxes honestly, the government has to treat them as gods. That's very, very important. They can't run from pillar to post to get what they're entitled for, right? Of course, automation has already improved, that to a large extent. But people who get away from the tax net, I would have welcomed, more initiatives to get them into the tax bracket. I know people who have much better lifestyles, but they are into businesses, where accounting is not done properly or whatever it is. They get away from paying taxes, and of
Right.
course, people in the
Right.
unorganized and informal sector of the economy.
Absolutely, Mr. Krishna. In fact, Saleh and I we were just discussing this as well, that less than 7% of Indians file returns, with 67 reporting zero taxable income. And this essentially is a part of the broader discussion on a fairer tax design. Now, we were discussing this, and I want to ask you the same question from what I gauged. Maybe you don't think that's the case, but do you think we're closer to achieving the aim of a fairer tax design?
I would presume so. I would presume, especially for the large number of small taxpayers, the kind of rationalization, the kind of rejigging of tax slabs have been made, the reduction of income tax rates for those slabs have been done. I think it will lead to better compliance for sure. And it would also help in a way to get more small taxpayers into the tax net. I think I welcome that. And the intent of the finance minister cannot be doubted, in terms of making the entire regime more taxpayer friendly, not just the income tax, but also the corporate tax payers. I think I welcome that
Right.
spirit with which the finance minister made that statement as part of her budget speech.
Indeed. Now, this is a budget that also lays the groundwork for what happens in the future. Now, the world over, the technology that has taken the world by storm is that of artificial intelligence. And what is interesting that in the course of her budget, Nirmala Sitharaman announced the setting up of a Center for Excellence in AI for Education with an outlay of 500 crore rupees. That is what the finance minister has announced for AI development. In your assessment, do you think that is enough? Could more have been done?
I think it's a baby step, but at least we start. We've seen how AI has taken the world, by storm. How it all started in the U.S. Now China, on many AI research areas, seems to have overtaken even the U.S. Indians are doing extremely well in AI. If you look at the big AI teams in the US, anywhere between 20% to 60% of the people manning, those teams are of Indian origin. But how much of that benefit is accruing to our country, that remains to be seen. The way AI could be leveraged big time in education, in skill development, in healthcare, I think those areas are to be identified and applications made, for a greater outreach, a greater efficacy of education programs, skilling programs, healthcare programs. And so I think this mission that has been announced with the outlay of 500 crore Indian rupees, I think it should, those are baby steps. When you set up a mission, when you set up a COE like that, it takes time to take off. And I'm sure as the setting up gets done, there'll be more money that the government would be pumping in there. But I think it's a step in the right direction. But the allocation, to my mind, could have been higher than 500 crores.
All right. Also, Mr. Krishna, with taxation being a major reform area, how will proposed changes impact corporate India, foreign direct investments, the overall ease of doing business?
So I think, I have always said that, if you look at industry, the ease of doing business has improved. Our rank on that parameter, which used to be 100 plus, has improved to 63. But I think we have to have yet loftier targets. If today India is the fifth largest economy in the world, why shouldn't we be fifth best nation in the world in terms of ease of doing business? I think that has to happen. See, wherever technology has been used, wherever e-governance has been used for automatic approvals and things like that, there's been a lot of improvement in ease of doing business. But wherever there's a human interface, where people from the industry, and especially the MSME ones, the big guys are able to get their things done because they are well entrenched into the machinery.
Right.
But the MSME, the micro units, they find it very, very difficult. And therefore, there has to be an onslaught on improving the ease of doing business. And we shouldn't rest unless we become among the top 5 or top 3 countries in the world in terms of ease of doing business. I think that's very important. She didn't mention it in so many words, but there was a reflection to that there'll be efforts made to, for ease of doing business, single window clearances and so on and so forth.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I think beyond the budget speech, we have to show extreme hunger by the Prime Minister, by the Chief Ministers, to not let any investment opportunity go off their state, the country. the kind of which you see Malaysia doing or Vietnam doing or South Korea doing, that kind of a hunger.
Mr. Krishna, it's interesting that you mentioned that there should be hunger to make it easier for companies to come, invest and to do business. But a criticism has been that there needs to be certainty in terms of law and taxation for companies to come and invest in India. One of the problems has been that of a retrospective taxation and retrospective legislation. Do you think that issue has been addressed here? Because if you want companies to come in and invest money in the manner that we want them to come and invest in, the companies need certainty of legislation. Do you think that's been addressed?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I completely agree. It couldn't have been addressed completely in the budget, but there's a recognition to that. Retrospective taxes did, keep a lot of FDI flowing to India, which would have, flowed to India. And there was a lot of flip-flop from the government, and finally it was withdrawn. I'm happy. But obviously, I mean, I have been into roles where I have seen a lot of overseas CEOs, business owners, founders. They always expect a regulatory certainty in the country, right? They can't take an investment decision at a time where certain policy regime prevails, and by the time their projects are under implementation or midway or in operation, the rules of the game changing, the government policy is changing. That completely puts their entire game becomes lopsided. So I think that has to. But I know, at least at the Prime Minister level, I know for sure there's a growing realization that there has to be a regulatory certainty, and if to be fair to this government in last 4 or 5 years, the broad direction has not changed. I mean, there could have been a minor tinkering of GST rates beyond the budget, or customs duty changes and all that. But by and large, the direction has not changed, which wisdom has dawned in. That's the impression I get.
All right, Mr. Krishna, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast with your insights on this.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Also, for more on this, we're now being joined by our correspondent Dharamjot Kaur. Dharamjot, thank you so much for joining us. Also, I have to mention, Saleh, Dharamjot's outlook on this entire budget. It has been switching with the skies as well. Dharamjot, now I want to ask you, we were discussing relief for the middle class. What's your outlook at this point and perhaps the key takeaways from this budget?